The Bear Essentials podcast gives older bears a place to gather for real talk regarding topics and issues that they can relate to. Here at The Bear Essentials, we aren't just having conversations. We are looking to provide actionable intelligence through real-life experience and expertise of our guests. Our mission is to build a strong community that elevates and motivates people to go beyond their limiting beliefs by helping them realize that getting older is not an excuse to hibernate on their goals, but a reason to work harder.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. Today's guest is former Navy SEAL Remi Adeleke. Remi is an author, actor, and filmmaker. Remi has had roles in Transformers: The Last Knight, also television series SEAL Team, along with the Amazon Prime series The Terminal List. Today, we talk about Remi's life being born in Nigeria, having to move to the Bronx, New York, after his father's death, and we get into his acting career, his connection with Michael Bay, and most importantly, we talk about this really important film that he has just released called The Unexpected, which deals with the darkness of human trafficking, in particular, human organ trafficking. So please, without further ado, let's jump into my interview with Remi Adeleke. Hey, Remi, how you doing? Thanks for joining today. I really appreciate this.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
So, Remi, for those who may not know you, could you just give a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Remi Adeleke. I was born in Western Africa, specifically Nigeria. Left Nigeria when I was about 5 years old for the Bronx after my dad died. And then, got in trouble selling drugs, running scams, doing different things. And then finally was able to find my way into the Navy. I spent 13 and a half years in the Navy, with the majority of that time spent in special operations as a SEAL. Got out in January 2016, did different things here and there. And then finally found my way into Hollywood in May of 2016, acting and consulting on Transformers: The Last Knight. And then that then began to progress into other opportunities, from acting and consulting in other commercials and other films, TV shows, and we were just talking about it off the air, SEAL Team, and then it just began to grow into a writing career. Wrote my book, which is right there behind me for those who are watching on the video, and then started writing screenplays. Wrote a screenplay called The Chameleon. That screenplay got picked up and got a book deal out of that. So wrote book one, just finished book one of a 3-book deal. Wrote another screenplay about the first group of African Americans to serve in special operations. I co-wrote an adaptation of Tim Ballard's book called Slave Stealers, which follows a Harriet Jacobs story. And then I wrote the Unexpected, which is a film I'm sure we're going to talk about today. And I wrote the follow-up, which is going to be a 2-hour feature version called Unexpected Redemption. So, and now I've gradually morphed into a writer-director, which all along that's been my goal. Everything that I've done as an actor, consultant, writer, all of that has been geared towards learning how to be a writer-director. So that's kind of where I am today.
Remi, it's an amazing story, and I just want to I'll be totally transparent with the audience. I found out about you because of The Unexpected.
Yeah.
Which we're definitely going to talk about. But then, I dove a little deeper, and I was blown away by your accomplishments and your life story. Blown away enough that I literally downloaded the audiobook over the past weekend, Transformed.
Oh, cool.
Definitely going to be listening to and reading that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. So as you introduced yourself, you mentioned being born in Nigeria. I did want to touch on that a little bit because, Remi, saying being born in Nigeria, but like a little more about that. Like, so can we talk about that a little more? Because I was like, whoa, wait a second. This is kind of really, really interesting. So could you give a little more background on that?
Yeah. So that part of the story kind of starts with my dad. My dad was the firstborn son to my grandfather. My grandfather had like 9 wives. And because that was part of the culture, my grandfather was a chief in the Yoruba tribe, whereas in Western culture, we refer to royalty as king, queen, prince, princess, Dutch, lord, that sort of thing. In African culture, especially West African culture, royalty is referred to as chief and or your last name. So my grandfather was a chief. and our last name Adeleke. So Ade means crown, Leke means is supreme. And then my first name is actually Ade Remi. So Ade Remi means the crown has appeased me. And so my dad, being the firstborn son, he inherited the title of chief, and then obviously he inherited the last name. And he ended up getting a full ride scholarship to study engineering and architecture in London. And that's where he thrived. He thrived primarily in the West in his early years. He's like one of the first Black men on the board of World Trade Center in New York City. As a matter of fact, one of his good friends was the architect of the Twin Towers. And then he was like the first Black man on the board of the British Financial Planning Council in Great Britain. And so, he was just a widely successful guy, entrepreneur, philanthropist. He did it all. And then fast forward to, once he got into his early to late 30s, his early to mid 30s, that's when he was really like, hey, I want to come back and do something in Nigeria, because that's where he was from. And so he went back to Nigeria, started a bunch of different businesses, and had this idea that he wanted to create like a city, like a financial district in Nigeria where people from all around the world could come and do commerce. And when anybody wants to do business in that side part of the world, they would come to Nigeria. Whether it was like a business deal in South Africa or other parts of Africa, my dad's plan was to create this financial sector where people could do business from all across the world, especially people in Africa. So he bought a massive plot of land for £8 million at the time. That land got confiscated by the government, because it was a military coup, and the military took the land. And then fast forward about 10 years later, the government was reinstalled. And they reopened this case, and they were like, hey, what do you want? And my dad said, hey, he wanted the swamp. So he started the process of dredging this foreshore and creating one of the first man-made islands in the world, which is now known as Banana Island, where a lot of millionaires and the richest African in the world, I believe, Dangote, he has that property on Banana Island. And but it was known as the Green Development Project. So that's kind of where I came along. So when I was born into the wealth and prestige, travel the world, cars, nannies, horses, drivers. My dad would host lavish parties. I mean, we were wealthy, like super, super rich. And but in 1987, the Lagos state government came in and they said, hey, this land that you created doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Lagos state government. The federal government was never supposed to give it to you. And my dad, it was like giving it to my dad. He essentially paid for it because it was taken years earlier. And so it, just turned into a really, really nasty thing. And it was interesting because there's a lot of corruption in Nigeria. And this was clearly one of those corrupt situations, because they waited until my dad had spent millions of dollars to, dredging the foreshore, signing contracts, doing all the things he did to create this financial sector, this island. And then once the land had formed, the contracts were signed, and the Lagos state government came in and said, all that work you did belongs to us now. And all of his assets and his finances were wrapped up in it. My mom, being American, she would tell my dad all the time, hey, I don't trust the Nigerian system. Like, we need to put money in the West just in case something happens. Like, we could always fall back on that. And my dad was always like, no, my priority is my country. Once we get this land fully formed and contracts signed, and people are renting out spaces and we're doing business, then we can put millions and billions of dollars into our U.S. bank accounts and do whatever we want to do. And so because all of his assets were wrapped up into it, when that happened, we went from rich to broke. He died like in the middle of it, in the middle of losing everything. So my mom, being an American, was just like, hey, there's no way I'm going to keep my kids here. So that's how we ended up leaving Africa.
Wow. I mean, I was reading into it yesterday and stuff, and I was just, again, I couldn't believe the whole story. And wow, and I can't even imagine your mom having having that happen and deal with it. So, okay. So fast forward, that all happens. She takes you back to the States. You go to Brooklyn, correct? Bronx. I'm sorry. So you go to Bronx, New York. And so what was that like, though, coming from where you were? I mean, culturally, and then even financially, like how did that evolve? What happened at that point?
But culturally wasn't much of an issue because my mom and financially because my mom did a good job of masking the reality of what had happened. You know, she kept the apartment that we were in. She kept it well kept. You know, we had a lot of my dad's art in the apartment. She kept it super clean. And, you know, us being young kids, we didn't fully understand death. As a matter of fact, I remember when she told my brother and I that our dad died, she said it in such a calm way that me and my brother looked at each other afterwards and were just like, okay. And she wasn't crying at all. And she said, me and my brother looked at each other and said, okay, let's go back to playing. You know, one, we didn't fully understand death, but two, she said it so calmly there and she wasn't crying. We didn't figure anything was wrong. So that's just an example of how my mom did a good job of masking the reality of what happened in order to keep us from falling apart and then keep her from falling apart because we were falling apart and create this never-ending cycle. So, so yeah, it wasn't much of a culture shock at all. And it was in part because we were just such young kids.
So in New York, I know that. So as you're in New York, I know you had mentioned it. You as you're growing up, some I'll call them bad decisions being made. And how does that transpire? Like what did you find yourself getting into?
Yeah, man, I started out small, man. I started out, you know, it was just I didn't have a father and you know, I didn't have any good influences. All my influences, most of my influences were, you know, hip hop culture, rap culture, streets, that sort of stuff. So I started out mimicking what I heard and listened to and watched, you know, and started out stealing from my mom, and then that progressed to stealing from jobs, that progressed to stealing from stores, that progressed to selling drugs, and then that progressed to running high level scams. And it was a gradual progression. And, you know, by the time I was 19, I had built a massive illegal enterprise where I was bringing in thousands of dollars a week, excuse me. And then I was funneling that money through my through a record company that I started. As a matter of fact, I still to the day, as a reminder, I keep the first CD we put together on my desk. That's me right there, and that's me right there in the suit. So I was essentially laundering the money I made illegally through the record company, and so that's kind of what it all led to.
So how does that? So I know some of the stuff that I've seen for you. You talked a lot about turning points.
Yeah.
And you mentioned one of the turning points was wanting to go into the military. So how's that go from what you had? Because I mean, yeah, it was illegal, but it was a lot, right? How do you go from that to wanting to be in the military?
Yeah. So, you know, when I was 15, 16, 15, I watched a movie called Bad Boys. And that was the first time I was exposed to like heroes who looked like me and came from my background and they still were cool. And then a year later, I saw The Rock, which that was my first exposure to Navy SEALs. And so that was kind of where the sea was planted to be a SEAL. It was a far-fetched idea, you know, kind of like me saying right now, I want to be president one day. Like chances of that happening is slim to none. So it wasn't like something that I was dead set on. It was just like a cool idea from having just watched the movie. And then, you know, after I grew up a little bit, as time passed, I forgot all about that and then got to the legal stuff and then deeper into the legal stuff because I was already doing crazy stuff at 15, 16. And then what happened was I ended up getting involved in a deal with a drug dealer with that. I sold him some products that were supposed to last for a certain amount of time. Those products only lasted for a fraction of that time. He came and threatened my life. At the same time, there were people who were doing the same thing I was doing and they were getting caught, prosecuted, and sent to federal prison. I was just always able to stay one step ahead of the law. And so those two situations were a huge wake-up call for me. That was kind of when I was like, you know what, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, but I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna end up dead on prison. So I made the drug dealer his money back and then I went cold turkey, just out of the legal hustle game. And then fast forward to June 6th, which was because that situation took place in December of 2001. So fast forward to June of 2002. That was kind of where I had like, you know, there's a lot more to the story. People will get it if they read the book, but that's when I kind of felt the call to actually do something because I was doing nothing. And that something is what essentially led me into the Navy. And again, it's all documented in my book. It's like it's more intricate than what I'm saying now, but it's all detailed in my book. And yeah, so went to go join the Navy, had warrants out for my arrest. The recruiter ran my background, found I had 2 warrants out for my arrest. And she took me to both judges, advocated on my behalf. both judges unanimously expunged my record, and then she went a step further and fudged the paperwork to sneak me into the Navy. And that's kind of how I got into the Navy. She would die 2 years after that, but of an autoimmune disease. But that one decision changed the trajectory of my life. And then, you know, when I got to boot camp, a Navy SEAL came and he played us this video of Navy SEALs, what Navy SEAls did. You know, he showed Navy SEALs jumping from planes, scuba diving, shooting guns, driving boom buggies in the desert with long hair, beards, and all that. And I was like, man, like, I remember that film. I was like, I really, really want to do that. But I was totally unqualified. I didn't have the academic scores. I was super skinny. I couldn't really, you know, I wasn't fit at all. You know, I didn't have the strength, the fortitude, none of that stuff. And so when I got to my first command naval hospital, Camp Pendleton, that's when I like put in the work. I went to my LPO and I said, hey, can you change my work schedule? Because I worked in a clinic, a family practice clinic. And I would work 4 hours in the morning, have 4 hours in the afternoon and just train, and then work 4 hours in the evening. Well, I would not even 4 hours. I would work the night clinic until the last patient left. And I did that relentlessly for 6 months. And I have a car, I would run 3 miles to the pool, jump in the shallow end, try to figure it out, run 3 miles back. I would watch Navy SEAL videos from SEAL training and create workouts. I studied the ASVAB for Dummies book. I just did that relentlessly. And then within a year of checking into that command, I was checking out on my way to SEAL training. So I went from being totally unqualified to being qualified to go, and eventually got through. And you know, and that's how I became a SEAL. Just put in the work, and became a program. Yeah.
You can probably see I'm sitting here smiling because as I hear you talking about it, I'm like, you know, I mean, obviously now, not me, I'm 50, right? Not, I can't, but like, I want somebody, you know what I mean? I'm hoping somebody sees this, and as you, as an example,
Yeah.
they can see that it is possible, and it's amazing what you put in, man, and we're able to accomplish that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. So you had your career in the SEALs, and you know, again, I want people definitely to read your book, and and to be conscious of your time too. I want to definitely get into some of after SEALs, how you got involved a little bit with Transformers, and then ultimately I want to spend time on talking about your film that just came out. So you're in SEALs, your career starts to wind down after 13 years. How do you find yourself involved with, you know, Transformers with Michael Bay? How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't searching for it. I was in grad school at the time, get my master's in organizational strategy. My goal was to go into full-time business consulting because I had already started doing that a little bit. And I was just in my office writing papers for school, and my phone rings, and this lady who works for Michael Bay, and she deals with the casting. And so she reached out to me and was just like, hey, Michael Bay's looking for somebody with your background to work on Transformers. It's just going to be one day. It's tomorrow. Are you available? I said, sure, why not? I'm just writing papers for school. And so she asked me to send her some pictures, just random pictures of me in my military uniform, and I sent them. And then she called me back and said, you got the job. So that one day, it was just supposed to be one day. That one day turned into 3 weeks, and then 3 weeks turned into 6 months. And I had ended up being on that film for the entire shoot from day one until we wrapped in and we started in May and until we wrapped in December. And that was how it all happened. Again, I wasn't looking for it at all. I had no desire to work in Hollywood. Like, that was not anything I would expect that I would do, and came knocking. So I was just open to the opportunity.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about that I found fascinating was, and I think I got the story right, but is it true that you wrote Michael Bay basically a letter saying how he helped change your life, and he has that letter framed in his office?
Yeah. He has it framed in his office. Yeah. I wrote a letter talking about how his 2 films, you know, really kind of opened my eyes up and inspired me to be a SEAL. And that decision to join the Navy and be a SEAL saved my life. You know, changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, that's so amazing to me. It's such a great story, Remi. I can't believe it. So obviously you're in not just SEALs, some other movies you were involved with, you know, some TV shows. One of my favorite book series, Terminal List by Jack Carr, I saw that you were in that also. So you've definitely been putting in the work as it comes to movies and TV, which is fascinating. But, you know, like I said, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to talk to you today, it was more about this, and I'm going to say the movie's amazing. The Unexpected.
Yeah.
how does that start to happen? Even in your mind, how does that start to build?
Yeah, so when I got out of the military in 2016, I still felt this call to serve, and in some way, and I would do different things. I would go to inner city schools and talk to the kids, and I would take kids out of the hood and of whatever city they were in, and take them to the other side of town to a nice restaurant, a movie, just to kind of expose them to the other side of life, the way my mom did for me and my brother. I went to prisons. I went to like maximum security prison, women's prison, men's prison, spoke, sat with people in prison who were doing life. I just did different things, like just to try and serve, use my platform. And because of the fact that I was a SEAL, like that had opened up a lot of doors. I wanted to use that platform as a SEAL to give back. And like just looking at prison as an example, those guys they would have people come sometimes, not all the time, but they would check out. But when they would hear a guy who was once the criminal turned a Navy SEAL come, they would listen to what I had to say. So it was a platform that allowed me to speak to people who typically want to listen to the everyday average person. So another thing that just kept on popping up and coming, kind of like the whole film business came my way, was human trafficking. 1 year, a nonprofit called Without Permission reached out to me. They had heard my story and they were just like, "Hey, you got a crazy story. We'd love for you to come help out with." And I didn't know what human trafficking was, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to come up to Sacramento and help out with what we're doing. We're having a rally. Can you help out?" So me and my wife, and I can't remember, I want to say my first son was born, but we all jumping on plane, flew up to Sacramento and helped out with a rally out there. Then like a year later, the owner of In-N-Out Burger, Lindsay, she has a nonprofit called Slave to Nothing. She reached out to me and said, "Hey," not her directly, but her team reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're having a fundraiser for her human trafficking nonprofit, Slave to Nothing. Can you come help out? Charity bowl game." I said, "Sure." And then, like I said, it just kept on like popping up over and over and over again. And then, 1 year, another nonprofit reached out to me that employs former SOF guys, special operations guys, to actually go rescue, people trapped in human trafficking and arrest Americans who go to different countries to have sex with underage kids who are traffic victims. And so as soon as I saw they sent me a video, and as soon as I saw the video, I was like, "Yo, I'm all in." My wife, she's a doctor, so she was 100% supportive as well. And it was just eye-opening going down and seeing it firsthand. It definitely completely changed your perspective, when you go from like helping raise money or speak on it or support it in different ways to actually going and doing a job that requires you to be boots on the ground. And when I was in this one slum in Dominican Republic, and in this particular slum, which was bad, it was one of the worst slums I've probably been in my life. The parents were known for selling their kids to traffickers, specifically their daughters. And the traffickers would buy them and in exchange for money and give the parents money, and the girls would be trafficked to the northern part of DR where the tourists would come. And obviously Western Americans, South Africans, freaking Europeans would come have sex with underage girls. And it was, and that was the way it was, and so like, I couldn't really understand how a parent could do that. And our liaison, he pulled me aside and pulled me into this chapel that was that was in the slum. So it was just think of this road, this really narrow road that like not the motorcycle, but motorbikes, mopeds would drive down. And then like that was the road. And then on each side of the road, you had like these shacks, these shanty shacks. And there was this one like shanty shack that was a chapel. And in the chapel at the end was a dead baby, a 6-month-old baby in a casket. And the guy explained to me that the baby died because the mother wasn't getting enough food and water. So she stopped producing milk and she got formula and mixed the formula with the local water. And that's what killed the baby, the water, because the water there is really bad in that slum. You're not supposed to drink the water. And that's what ultimately killed the baby. And so he was using it as a teachable moment for me to help me understand that these people are desperate. Like, so for the parents, it's like either we sell our daughter to traffickers or all our kids die. You know what I mean? All our kids get sick or we don't have the resources. it still doesn't make it understandable, but it kind of gives you, it gives you some small level of understanding as to why they would do it, but it doesn't justify it at all. And the deeper I got into human trafficking and organ harvesting, the more I learned that is the ultimate, that's the connecting tissue, it's desperation. A lot of the victims are desperate, very, very desperate. On the organ harvesting side, it's not just the victims who are desperate, but it's the people who are receiving the organs who are desperate. At the end of the day, it all comes back to desperation. And traffickers, they prey on desperate people. They prey on the vulnerable. That because they know, somebody who doesn't have food or water, or somebody who is, living in utter poverty, they're going to be desperate to get out of that, and they'll be willing to do whatever they can. One of the key ways, in my opinion, to overcome adversity is to try and overcome poverty. Because and I don't know, there's been poverty since the beginning of time, and there will be poverty at the end until the day this planet is no more the way it is now. And so, but that's one way, is to really, it's two ways: education and eradicating poverty. And that was kind of why I made the film. So fast forward, after I got back from that particular trip down to the DR, where, I was in the slum, as soon as I landed, I had a voicemail from Michael Bay's producing partner, Mike Case. And he was like, "Hey, Bay's starting his next movie. He's been looking for you. He wants to hire you to be the consultant, train the actors, and fly to Italy and Abu Dhabi and be on set while he's doing a movie. Are you available?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." The good thing about that call was it was like those two worlds collided for me. The human trafficking side and the filmmaking side. And that's kind of where I was just like, man, I got to combine these two worlds, right? Because how can I have a bigger impact? And one thing I've been telling a lot of people lately who've been asking me, hey, what do I do? Like, especially people who watch the film, they're just like, I'm appalled. I didn't know that this stuff happened. Like, what can I do? And one of my first answers is do what you could do with what you have. And so that was the answer that came to me. Remi, do what you could do with what you have. You're a filmmaker. You have access to actors and film equipment and, and locations. Make a movie. That's what you could do. Because I can go down to South America, Middle East, different parts of Asia, and rescue 100 kids trapped in human trafficking. When I say human trafficking, people always just think of sex trafficking. Human trafficking is a blanket term. You got sex trafficking, organ harvesting, which my film falls under, labor, forced marriage, drug trafficking. I released an interview recently of a guy who I interviewed who was lured to Mexico, along with other migrants from different parts of the country, different parts of South America. And he said that kids were used as mules to traffic drugs into the US. And you have blood trafficking, which is, I'm not sure how prevalent it is, but there was an international story that came out earlier this year of a Chinese businessman who traveled to Cambodia, and he was abducted by a gang, and they blood trafficked him for months until he was able to escape. So there's all these different forms of human trafficking. So I just want to kind of explain that, because so many people just hear human trafficking and they think sex. It's not just sex. And so in my mind, I could go down to these countries and rescue 100 kids, but they still want to be 100,000, 200,000 more for every 100 kids I rescue. And I need to be able to have a bigger impact. And one thing that we would do overseas is we would partner with PsyOps units and civil affairs units. And they would go into the towns and hand out soccer balls and rebuild schools and hand out pamphlets and just kind of try to win the hearts and the minds of the locals, because if we could win the hearts and the minds of the locals, then they would tell us where the bad guys are when they come. They would not hide bad guys. They would not allow their kids to be recruited to be suicide bombers. They would leave the area if we told them, hey, leave this area because we need to conduct a specific mission. We would be able to win their hearts and minds through PsyOps and civil affairs, and in doing that, we could be more effective in doing our job. So that's where the idea came from. It was when those two worlds, when I came back from this trip down to DR, and when I had these messages from Michael Bay's producing partner about working on the film, that's why I was just like, I got to make this movie. I got to tell. And it didn't start out as a movie. It actually started out as a TV show. I wrote a TV treatment and tried to make it as entertaining with the espionage side of things, and this DIA agent trying to find a link between, not trying to find out how this terrorist group is still able to finance their operations, and he doesn't find out till the end of the season that it's being financed through human trafficking. So it was like this really intriguing espionage-esque TV show, and nobody wanted to pick it up. And so that's when, so there was a long process. It wasn't just like, boom, I'm making a movie right away. It was about a year and a half to 2 year process until I finally said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to just make the movie. And I know I can't make a full-on feature-length movie because I can't afford it, but I'm just going to use my money, as much of my money as I can, and try to get some other money from other people and make the best quality short film I can in order to be able to educate the masses and show people that this is real, and hope in the hopes that people will engage in some way, even if it's as simple as sharing the link to the film. And I tell people sharing the link, when I say that, I don't necessarily just mean on social media, because the thing is, when you share it on social media, because of the subject matter, it gets suppressed through the algorithm. So when I say share on social media, it's like share the link, text the link, email the link, tell people at your jobs, family members, friends, people within your sphere of influence. That's the way it spreads. And then tell them, hey, once you watch it, if you feel moved, you do that. That's the first way you could do something. That's the purpose of the film. Because as I said, when I first got into this world back in, 2016, I was unconscious of I didn't know what human trafficking was. And the little that I did know, I didn't believe. Right. And so I wanted to be able to bring the type of awareness that came to me from doing the job. And that was kind of the whole inspiration behind making the film.
Well, a couple things I'd just like to add to that so that people that hear this know. I know you mentioned not full-length movie. You made it like based on what you could afford. Yeah. Remi, honestly, I would have never known that, because this was so well done.
Yeah.
As a movie, take away the subject matter. This is so well done as a movie. And the subject matter is obviously dark. It's important, but trust me, you'll want to watch this as a movie. Remi did such a great job with it. I can't recommend it enough. And congratulations on that. And I think honestly, you did, like you said, you did what you could with what you had. And by doing what you did, you're spreading that awareness. And I think that this is going to really catch on, and more people are going to become aware, because I think, like we talked earlier before we started, people hear about this stuff, but it's almost like somewhat so dark. You don't want to think about it, but that's the problem. Like your quote to start that movie, we need to think about it. We need to do what we can. So I will definitely be sharing that link and things like that. Just to end on a little bit of a positive note, I wanted to ask you, I keep looking, Time to Pay the Man. Is that a clothing line, whatnot, that you have?
So my clothing line is Kejo, Kejo, and we have the idea behind it. Again, do what you could do with what you have. And about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, well, I would say even longer than that, on social media, I would do these inspirational, motivational, educational quotes like, solutions greater than excuses, and all that stuff. And people would say, man, that was good. Like, thank you so much. Like, that was cool. Like that message there. I needed to hear that. I needed to hear this. I needed to hear that. And then one day I was like, man, why don't I just create an apparel company? And that's the theme of the apparel company, is like inspirational, motivational, and educational quotes, stuff that people can, so that people can be the inspiration, motivation, education through wear, right? They could be wearing a shirt and somebody's like, hey, what does that mean? And then they explain the meaning, or they get the meaning right away. Most of the shirts, you get the meaning right away. And so, we have our website, kejowear.com, Kejo. We've been crushing in sales in the last, which was a surprise, but it was just like a random idea I had one day sitting on the couch and didn't know how it was going to go, because I know a lot of people start apparel companies, and we've been in business for over a year and a half. Our shirts and our sayings have been on TV shows. And it's going to be on the upcoming, our Unlimited. Our process greater than outcome was on the last season of SEAL Team. This season, Unlimited Potential is going to be on this season. And it's just a cool, and our quality, we use the best quality shirt. So it's like, it's fitted, you can work out in it. You know, it's just great material. We got tank tops, hoodies. Yeah, that's it. And time to pay the man, essentially what that means is it's a reminder to yourself that, you know, because it's a saying in SEAL training, right? So if you get in trouble, you gotta pay the man. If you don't make your run times, gotta pay the man. And so I kind of took it and added time to pay the man, with the context being, let's say you eat a cheeseburger, eat something super unhealthy, and you haven't been to the gym. Guess what? It's time to pay the man. Let's say, you know, you've been lazy. Guess what? It's time to pay the man. Let's say, you know, and then when I say lazy, I mean like not doing your job, you know, as what excellence as you should, and you're seeing how that's affecting you. Let's say you're not being a good parent. It's time to pay the man. It's time to go do it. Get after it. Do something. And so that's what I love about the shirt and the saying, because it's a reminder to self, hey, if you're not doing if you're not holding yourself to the standard that you have set, then you got to pay the man until you get to that standard.
Yeah, I love it. And for everybody who's watching this too, Remi it's one of the most motivational people I've seen, because he's on another show that I've been watching for years. I started watching a show called SAS, Who Dares Wins, about the British Special Forces, and Remi is on a season of that for 2022. And it's going to be coming to America with Remi. So you get to see Remi at his motivational best. It's very enjoyable. So Remi, anything else as far as websites, anything that people can check out to find you?
Hey, you know, the film, man. The biggest thing is, you know, it's the movie, man. I didn't make the movie to make money. As a matter of fact, I'm losing money. I spent $150,000. I don't get paid for views. I had an opportunity to sell a film to a distributor, and people would have to subscribe to watch it, but I decided against that because I want to wake up the world. I want to wake up the masses to the reality of what's going on, and you know, and even if it's even. And the reason why is so that people can do something. And even if that something is, I'm going to share the link because I was educated. And then the next step can be, I'm going to go on a human trafficking website and learn the signs and symptoms of a trafficked victim. There's a story out of Atlanta, I believe, where a Delta flight attendant, she had just taken an online course about how to recognize a trafficked victim. And she was on a plane and she saw this kid with an adult, and just every normal person would probably be like, oh, that's the parent with the kid. The parent and kid flying together. But it was just something about that kid, and that kid was presenting the signs of a trafficked victim. And she could have been wrong and looked like an idiot, but you know what? She was right, and she said something and did something and saved that child's life. Come to find out, that child was being trafficked to another state, and that child was abducted and was a trafficked victim. And so again, you know, the film is about breeding awareness. And even if that awareness is, hey, you going to a human trafficking website to learn the symptoms, it's free. You don't have to pay for anything. Nothing, everything that I'm giving away and the nonprofits that I'm partnering with give away are free. There's no bait and switch. It's not, hey, watch the film and then give me money. Or it's not, go to this human trafficking. If you want to donate to a human trafficking nonprofit, that's fine. But that's not the intent. The intent is to make people aware so that they can engage in some way and do their part, because human trafficking is a global issue. It's a global issue. It's a $32 billion industry in America alone, 30 to 35 to be exact, not to be exact, but as a range alone. Internationally, it's a $100 billion industry. Most people don't know that. And I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, and the interviewees are just like, I didn't know this. I didn't know it. And I'm bringing up stories, and they're like, I looked up that article where you told me about the woman in India. You told me about Egypt. Egypt is the organ harvesting capital of the world. There's a story out of Costa Rica where people were flying to Costa Rica from a Western country to get, you know, who needed kidney transplants. They were flying to Costa Rica and getting kidneys from poor people in Costa Rica. And I tell them that, oh, I looked it up. I thought that was, no, it happens. It's real. And again, that was the point of the film, is to create awareness. And so my last message to you, to everybody, watch the film, share the link, and then do something. And this will be the very last thing I say. I've heard so many people over the course of my life, even myself, I've said it myself. I've heard so many people say from different walks of life, if I lived in the 1800s in America when slavery was widespread and prevalent, and I would do something. I would fight against the slave masters. I'd hide slaves. I'd die fighting to end slavery. I've heard so many people of so many different political spectrums, ideologies, races, all say that. I do everything to stop slavery. Well, guess what? Slavery is very prevalent today. It's widespread today. And we all have the opportunity to do what we say we would do if we lived back then. We have the opportunity to do that now. And, it could be as simple as watching the film, learning, and then sharing it.
Remi, that's a great message to end on. And I think it's really important because I think too many people, when they hear the word slavery, right away it becomes about race and color, and it's really about people. And I think that was a perfect message. So for everyone watching this, I'd like to just say this, in line with Remi's shirt. I think Remi's the man for what he's doing, and the way we should pay him is we're going to share that link and we're going to get this word spread. So please, everyone, I'm asking on behalf of Remi, myself, and all these victims, let's share that link. This is important work, and it doesn't cost us a dime. So Remi, thank you again. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for having me on.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.